welcome back to our channel. This is Sans Lectures 256. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media handles. That is at X at Sans Lectures 256 and on WhatsApp at Sans Lectures 256. So today we are still continuing with our with our series of developmental studies. And last time we looked at the various theories of developmental studies, and that was the modernization theory and the school of thought and some of the reasons that people had put forward to explain why they had postulated such a theory. So today we are going to look at the dependency theory. So after having had a bloom of the modernization theory, especially around 1950s and 1960s, the modernization theory boomed around 1950s up to 1960s, and that theory overblamed like the South that it had failed to develop. Then some various scholars came up and said, this theory was too Eurocentric. It tried to portray the North as everything was very fine, that the South had solely been responsible for its underdevelopment, and the theory tended to neglect a variety of factors. And that is how the dependency theory came into existence. Some of the proponents or some of the scholars that postulated this theory were people like Frank Gunda, Andrew Frank Gunda, people like Amin Samil, and others. But let's talk about Frank Gunda. Frank Gunda was an American-German sociologist and historian. So in around 1970, he was appointed to become a presidential economic advisor to the president of Chile. That means he was exposed to the actual environment within the South. So after his observation, he came up with a conclusion that no, the South is not only developed because of its traditions and characteristics. There are other things that have forced it or that have made it remain underdeveloped. And that is how we came up with a saying that the South has remained underdeveloped, because of its relations with the North. The South has remained underdeveloped because of its relations with the North. Because of its relations with the North. The South has remained underdeveloped because of its relations with the North. Actually, some scholars say that it is that interconnectability between the North and the South that has largely played a role to say that the South remains underdeveloped. So this theory roots from the time of slavery. These people are saying that the modernization theory don't put into consideration things like slavery, things like colonialism. So there is no way you can solely blame the South that it has been the sole cause of its underdevelopment. Actually, they continue to argue that the North and the South are two sides of the coin. North and the South are two sides of the same coin. So what does this mean? When you have a coin and you flip it, that means one side will appear and the other shall be covered. So the North was always developing at the expense of the South. As the South was continuously deteriorating, the North was continuously developing. Actually, this theory created a class of people called radical dependentians. What are radical dependentians? These people believe that our relations with people in the South are supposed to be sabotaged with the North. That we have benefited nothing from the relations with the North. So we should cut all ties with the North. Actually, these people say that all ties with the North should be cut. Actually, in the 1970s, these people were very vital, especially in the Asian politics. That is how we came about with things like the Far East crisis. So if you want to know more about that, please go read about it, or you stay on the channel very attentive. The Far East crisis, one of the things that drove into research, people are like, we can survive without their aid. We can survive when we have locked ourselves in. So these people came up with such a school of thought. Frank Gunda and his other colleagues gave some of the reasons that saw the South remain underdeveloped, but trying to correlate it with the relations with the North. Number one, they say that our underdevelopment roots from slavery. So they say that this slavery saw the export of a lot of human labor, which human labor was very vivacious, creative, and thinkative. So all that human capital was lost to the North. So people that had developmental ideas, instead of retaining them in the South, were always taken out. People that would work to see that the development of the South continues, because there was export of women and strong gigantic men that would venture into various activities, postulating the development of the South, were all taken out as slaves. However, even taking them out as slaves was well packaged as slave trade, and it became a creeping normalization. On top of that, thereafter, the missionaries coming in the 1880s and playing on the abolition of slave trade that ended at the end of the 18th, and as we enter in the 20th century, now colonialism comes in. Colonialism comes in. So, in slavery, there was export of human labor and other resources. Slavery, here in East Africa, you had things like long distance trade. So there was export of a lot of human labor, things like gold, things like diamond, things like copper were always exported to the North. Then later, after the abolition of such trade, or after declines of such trade, now colonialism comes in. Colonialism was now really characterized by maximum exploitation, but which maximum exploitation was always covered with ghee, that it was always ghee, literally. The colonialists said that they are going to construct a road to connect, let's say, from Kampala to Port Bell, just to facilitate movement of goods. From Kampala to Namasagari to enable movement of tobacco. They said that they are going to construct a railway to connect to Kasese so that they can extrude the copper. They say that they are going to construct a road to Pakwach so that they can easily transport the tobacco. All these things were already transported to the coast and supplied to industries in the North. Yet they were supposed to be utilized in where they were produced. All this saw the underdevelopment of the South. Colonialism was characterized with maximum exploitation of resources, because by and large, most of the colonialists were capitalists, which capitalism is characterized by exploitation. Next, these people continue to say that there was verticalization of the economy. Verticalization of the economy. What is verticalization of the economy? So they came up with an illustration that looks like this. That I'm assuming this is a central core country. A country like England, a country like United States of America. Then you have a peripheral core country. A country like Canada, a country like Belgium. Then you have the core peripheral country. This is the core peripheral country, and this is the peripheral core country. A country like South Africa, whose economy has a little bit moved ahead compared to other countries in the South. Yes, then you have the peripheral country like Uganda, a country like Zambia, a country like Tanzania. Yes, they try to say that goods will move from, let's say, Uganda here, then they go to the United States. Sometimes the goods will move from Uganda to South. I'm assuming this is South Africa. Here we are having Canada. Here we are having United States of America. Or it can be China or any other country whose GDP has a little bit moved up, especially in the north. So goods will move from Uganda to USA. Goods will move from Uganda to South Africa. Goods can move from Uganda to Canada. However, these goods that will now move from Uganda to Canada, at the same time they will end up in the USA. These goods that will now move from Uganda to South Africa, they will find a way ending up in the USA. Some goods can move from South Africa to Canada, then they will also find their way to the United States of America. So that you can see both countries are in the south, but at the end of the day, all services end up in the north. This is what they call verticalization of the economy. Still, this has seen a lot of losses in terms of profits, which are very vital in the development of a nation. After the verticalization of the economy, these people further tend to blame neo-colonialism. So, by the time the Second World War ended, most of the countries in the south had found ways to fight for their independence. They had found ways to fight for their independence. But the colonial masters, who were capitalists, were not willing to let go of these countries because they still needed their resources. So what did they do? They went behind and appointed their own leaders, which leaders would be very vital in continuously carrying their colonial interests. Yes? For example, in Congo, when Patrice Lumumba was murdered, which saw the coming of Mobutu Sese Seko to replace him because he was being brought in by the Belgians and the USA so that they could continue extorting the minerals, and in many other African countries. So this neo-colonialism saw the continuous dictation of policies that would run the colonies, that would run the colonies post-independence. So, neo-colonialism, yes, the colonialists set us free, but they found a way of hiding behind our own fellows just to continue. So these policies that were always being made ended up serving the interests of the people in the north. Next, they also blame what they call global capitalism. So, in the development of the discipline of developmental studies, we say that there was a time of the Cold War. The Cold War was characterized by differences in ideologies. Socialism versus capitalism. Socialism is where you have the government almost controlling every sphere of life. Yeah, people in capitalism are like, let the market forces of demand and supply decide who is who. So, this capitalism is characterized by exploitation. There is maximum exploitation of resources in capitalism. Yes? Exploitation of capitalism. They are like, you see, we should all supply goods on the international market. By the end of the day, you will be observant that goods that come from the south are bought cheaply. Yes? Cheaply, because they have standard. And after processing them, they bring them back still to the same south at a very high price. That is number one. Then, these capitalists work with a group of people called the bourgeoisie. So, bourgeoisie are capitalists who own most of the country's wealth. On top of that, they also own the means of production. Countries, especially here in the central, always they have what they call the 20 out of 80 divide. That 20% of the population is controlling 80% of the country's resources. The rest are controlling the resources of many. Yes? This controlling the resources of many. But, for example, in China, they say that 1% of the country's population is controlling over 30% of the country's resources. So you can do the 20-80 divide. Then in America, they usually talk of what they call the Wall Street. The rich niggas of the Wall Street. So this is a group of people. In fact, this is a place where you can find very many offices or very many gigantic companies. And this 2080 divide does not only stop at the national level, it is continuously even carried up to the global system, that you find one country controlling a lot of resources. Just that the economical climate goes on changing, but previously countries, especially members of the G7, used to control a very huge chunk of the world's total economic value, but things have gone on changing. So if you since you control a lot of the world's resources, that means you are free to exploit whoever you want. This bourgeoisie work with a group of people called the comprador bourgeoisie. The comprador bourgeoisie. The comprador bourgeoisie. The comprador bourgeoisie. So the comprador bourgeoisie are a class of people in the middle class countries that work with MNCs, multinational companies. They work with foreign investors. Then they work with military officials. They can work with bankers. All these are always foreign but capitalists. Yes? So, these comprador bourgeoisie are people like you and I who dwell here in East Africa, but you can to ascertain their interests. Then, still these capitalists have developed organs like IMF, which is International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and these organs, all these organizations give loans. They give loans. But these loans tend to come with a lot of requirements, things like high interest rates, that is number one. On top of the high interest rates, they tend to also come with a lot of rules that if you don't do this, I shan't give you this loan. If you don't do that, if you don't allow us access your oil, if you don't allow us access your minerals, we shan't give you this loan. Yet, by and large, most of the African countries, especially their leaders, their survival is more important than the existence of their nation. So they end up fulfilling the interests of such organizations that are a reflection of global capitalism. Next is the role played by these people continue to blame MNCs, multinational corporations. Things like Shell. Here in Uganda we have things like Shell, things like Coca-Cola, things like KFC, things like MTN. Previously we had Orange, and others. So these are what we call multinational corporations. It is one organization but having different headquarters. In senior one or the lower levels, we used to be told of multiple shops that they are under one management but have different branches. That same concept is applied under multinational concepts. Shell, Coca-Cola, KFC, MTN, Orange. You can see that most of these bodies are cross-cutting. What do? These bodies, first of all, they do profit repatriation. They amass or mobilize a lot of profits, and after they take them away to their countries of origin, and most of these multinational corporations originate from the north. On top of that, there is less labor pay, and no provision of protective gears. So, by and large, especially in areas where these multinational corporations have been successful, you rarely find laws like minimum wage standard. So, the government leaves it to the owners of these corporations to decide how much they are supposed to pay a worker on a daily basis or per hour. On top of that, that they end up getting less labor pay. On top of that, they provide less protective gears. You find somebody working at a petrol station, but in case an accident happens, you don't find things like fire extinguishers. Yet, most of these originate from the north. After getting a lot of wealth, a lot of profits, they end up taking them back to their country of origin, developing it, leaving areas where they have gotten the profits underdeveloped. Actually, in Uganda, for example, the fuel industry was mainly dominated by Shell and Total. Which Shell and Total we know that originate from the north. Actually, Total is a French company. So you see, after amassing a lot of profits from Uganda, they are taken back to France, developing it, leaving areas where they collect these profits underdeveloped. That is why the people that came up with the dependency are like, such corporations wouldn't exploit us unless we had no ties with their countries of origin, especially in the north. Next, then we have what they call political and economic subservience. Political and economic subservience. Political and economic subservience. Subservience. By and large, very many countries in the south, whenever they are designing their budgets, they tend to have to leave gaps for grants and reliefs. And these two, we know that they come from the north or the developed world. So, these two come with a lot of instructions. And since we have economic dependency, sometimes it can be called dependence. Since you have economic dependence on these people on the north, that gives them what in English they call status conferral about our political climate. They become very vital in deciding who rules the country, when should they rule the country, how should they rule the country, which laws are supposed to be passed. For example, when you read about the 1982 coup d'etat in Kenya, one of the theories that are postulated that saw Moi coming back as the president of Kenya was the role played by these other actors. They are called other actors in the Kenyan politics. Other actors that were foreign. So they saw that if Moi was to leave away, their foreign interests would be fading up. Whether they are let us keep this new leader who had just come, and they saw the reinstatement of Moi as the president of Kenya. But how did that come about? Because by and large, in East Africa, Kenya is one of those countries that has a huge economic dependency of members from the north. Yes, economic subservience leads to political subservience. That whenever we depend on those people from the north economically, we give them the right, we give them the pleasure, we give them the opportunity to dictate our political climate. Then, still these people say, their problem is the international trade. So, this international trade, first of all, the people that set the rules that will govern international trade are things like the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. And these some of these organs, things like IMF, they not only give loans, but they can also set rules that are supposed to be followed. When you pay loan, how do you pay the loan, what should you use to pay the loan. So these set the rules that will be followed in international trade. On top of setting the rules, remember these ones also have their masters. So they are supposed to set rules that favor their masters. So they end up setting rules that will promote the development of the north, limiting the development of the south. Then this international trade has also seen the south becoming a primary producing economy. For example, you have your crude oil. Yes? crude oil. But this crude oil, they're like, you can't have a refinery to purify your oil. So we shall have to first export it to the country that is licensed to have a refinery. Then after, we shall bring back the processed oil. Processed oil. You see how we end up being primary producing members in the south end up being primary producing economies, and this leaves us as the primary consuming economy. That we export our cotton and we end up buying the clothes. We export our herbs and we end up buying the medicine. So all these, the money that would have been immersed and they would use for development ends up being reduced, inhibiting the development of the South. However, the proponents of this theory came up with some solutions. As we saw in the modernization theory, they suggested some things that should be changed for all of us to develop equally. They said there should be change in international system solutions. They said there should be change in international system. Change in the international system. Which change do they mean? They say that organizations such as the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and other organs that are very vital in the running of this world, politically and economically, that Africa, because I am an African, Africa should have a say. Just as it is within the UN that every country's vote is equal and it can count. Even inside organization, Africans should have a say. Not only having a say, but they should also be granted what they call veto powers. Powers to refuse and the whole world can hear. In that way, that will see the making of policies that not only favor the development of the North, but at the same time with the development of the South. That is it we had for today. Till next time.